thought we'd talk about for a few weeks, however long, until Isaiah gets his stuff together. Just kind of talk on end time. And I thought, well, right off the bat, we have to talk about Israel because that's where all prophecy hinges on. Without Israel, nothing else can happen. Jesus couldn't even come back if there wasn't Israel reestablished. And so I just kind of go over some of that. There's things, there's all kinds of prophecies about the end time. I mean, all kinds. Of course, the main one, like I said, was the rebirth of Israel and Jerusalem. Jerusalem's another big thing that had to be. That was done in 1967, but without Jerusalem, it still wouldn't have happened. That Jerusalem is where the temple's going to be. It's where the Lord, it's where the beast, does the abomination in there. So there had to be Israel, but there also had to be Jerusalem. He even said...
Real quick, this eschatology is what I think is one of the most fascinating topics that you can get into in Scripture, but it's also one of the most difficult.
Yes.
So if you have questions, please ask. It does nobody any good to leave here and
still don't know what I'm talking about.
Knowing what's being said, so we know what eschatology is.
Oh, yeah, I think. But still, and the thing about prophecy is a lot of it is what you think. I mean, it's according to that person. Not everybody thinks about it the same way. Not everybody has the same interpretation. So you go by Scripture as the best you can. The Lord reveal what He needs to reveal. But that's the good thing about it, is when you have discussion about it, because you might get an insight that somebody else has on something that you never thought about before or whatever. So, but like I said, it has to be, it all starts with Israel and then Jerusalem. And it's fascinating how it all come about. The Lord had even prophesied 100,000 years ago that when He did bring Israel back, that they would worship Him in their own language. And they do. They are the only nation that has ever, their language died, but when they came back, it was revived. I mean, the only language that was ever lost has came back. And the same way with the country. I mean, it's all miraculous. He also said that, before that the Jews would be, exiled first. They'd be in all the nations, which they were. They would return to Israel, and then Israel would become a fertile land, because Israel's always been a desert. The Middle East is nothing but desert. And so that was another thing, and that's another thing that we'll go over.
Makes you wonder why in the world there was such a fight over this literal barren land.
And it was barren.
Yeah, and yet every nation around it
wanted
this piece of land, and it didn't make any sense. But of course now we see it is turning fertile.
It is very fertile. Plus they're finding all kinds of riches and stuff, out of it, like the Bible said they would.
Like 80 or 90% of the world's flowers and melons.
Yep. And also the fruit and the vegetables, everything like that. And for it to be such a small place, it's only like, I was going to write down the dimensions, but it's only like the size of our state of New Jersey. If you can imagine that, Israel as a whole is only that big. And yet, it's just miraculous how the Lord has brought them back. They have fought off all of these armies and continue to do so. It's just all miraculous. That's all you can say about it. And then, of course, there had to be plans to rebuild the temple. There's got to be that temple in there. And also some other things was that, Israel would always be surrounded by, enemies. That's in Psalms. The development of worldwide communications, a revelation. There's just so much. But if you don't understand about what a miracle Israel is, then you kind of lose sight of all the other. Because like I said, without Israel, none of the other prophecies could come forward, and Jesus couldn't even come back, because there has to be Israel. in Deuteronomy, the Lord said, and the Lord will scatter you among the people. Now, the Jews were already kind of getting scattered a little bit after Jesus died, or before that, because of the Babylonians and them. But once the Romans took over in 70 A.D., the Jews were scattered as a whole. That's when they lost their country. And you're talking about almost 2,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. But here's what the Lord had said about it. And the Lord will scatter you. He told them. He said, even in the wilderness, you keep doing this. And, you go after idols. I'm a jealous God. You keep doing this, and I will scatter you. And he did. But he said, and the Lord will scatter you among the people, and you will be left few in number among the nations where the Lord will drive you. And that happened. Everywhere. I mean, everywhere. It was wild. It's for here and yep, that's exactly right. And among those nations you shall find no rest, nor shall the sole of your feet have a resting place. But there the Lord will give you a trembling heart, failing eyes, and anguish of soul. And once they went to all these other countries and were scattered, they had no rest. People have always been against the Jews. I mean, they've always, Hitler being the biggest one, but the Jews had no place. And even today, people are against Jews. I mean, we even see it here in this country. And the Lord said that that would happen. And so it did. And they're still hated today for no reason of their own. Let's see, and Isaiah said that he would set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people that are left. He promised that he would scatter them, but he also promised that he would regather them too, here in Isaiah, and a whole lot of other places. Let's see here. And like I said, even when he brought them back, they even got their own language back and everything. Was amazing. If you have ever studied and seen how, the United States, of course, had a big hand in making Israel a nation again. But if you have ever seen or read about what took place to bring that about, it's all miraculous. I mean, it is absolutely miraculous. Because, and there again, that was another prophecy in Isaiah. It says, who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? And it was. It was born in a day. They just declared it, and here he said this back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before that. I mean, there's just no denying. When you look at all the prophecies, hundreds, thousands of years ago, that brought it back and fulfilled these prophecies, there are no odds of that. There's just no odds of that. It's just amazing.
I think it's interesting too, even their songs, right? Those were meant to be sung.
Right.
And well, how do you know how to sing those? It's not like they had sheet music
Right.
like we have,
Right.
And yet, even still, with the way that they wrote it and the little jots and tittles in Hebrew, they were able to figure out how to sing and when to go up and pitch and down and all this. And I sing that. I say, oh my gosh! Like even down to their songs have been restored.
Right.
Not just the way they speak and their written language, but even down to the songs of the songs. Those have been restored as well.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Because, like I said, you've got to remember, we're talking over almost 2,000 years they were scattered. How can a nation that has been scattered and done away with come back again? I mean, who sets that in motion? Nobody cared. No, I mean, earthly, nobody cared if Israel or the Jews had their home place again. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of years. But yet the Lord just made it come about, to where it happened, just like he said it would happen, and even in a day's time. And then when you look at Jerusalem, like I said, not only did they have to be in Israel, because even Revelation, we've got to understand the end time prophecy, especially Revelation and what's going to happen during the tribulation. That's in Israel. It's all about the Jews. And so when we think of things happening, we've got to remember that it's taken place from the standpoint of the Jews. And so there had to be an Israel for any of this to happen. There had to be a Jerusalem for the temple, because that's where the Antichrist goes in and breaks up the treaty. And so therefore, not only did there have to be Israel, but in 1967 they didn't have, Jerusalem wasn't part of that. Yes, they were made Israel as a country, but Jerusalem was not until 1967, when they, had the 6-day war, and they got that back. That had to be. That was another miraculous thing, because you're talking about this small area, fighting off all of these countries. I mean, it's what? In 6 days. I mean, miraculous. There's no other way around it. And if you have ever read, there is a news thing that was done, a documentary that it's called Against All Odds. And it talks about where, during that war, how these soldiers and things talks about the miracles that happened that made them win that. I mean, you're talking about soldiers. You're not talking about people, Christians. I mean, it's just miraculous. The Lord, there's just no other way. It's the Lord. And when you read that and you understand that, you know that all of these prophecies are being fulfilled to the T. I mean, it's amazing. That was wrote hundreds and thousands of years before. It's wild. And then, not only did he say, let's see. Well, there's another place where he promised them in Ezekiel. It says, I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of the countries, and bring you into your own land. There again, all the way back in Ezekiel, all those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And he did that. 1948. I mean, it's wild. I mean, it blows my mind the more I find out about it. And then not only did he say that would happen, but he also said that in Isaiah he talks about how once they got to that land would start flourishing. Like we were talking about, the vegetation, the fruit. That had never been before. I mean, you're talking about desert land. No water, no whatever. Just like all the surrounding area. It's desert land. But he said that it would blossom. Once he done that the country would blossom. And in Isaiah, let's see, I think it's Isaiah 2, in Isaiah 35. The wilderness and the place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossoms as the rose. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto the excellency of Carmel, and they shall see the glory of the Lord. And there's just so many other things that just, and hopefully I'll get to all of them and tell what he said would happen, and it's happening today. After all these thousands of years, it's happening again today in Israel. And then too, let's see, let me read this in Hosea, let's see, chapter 6 or chapter 3. No, it's chapter 6. Now, this is in Hosea. It says, and the Lord is talking about the Jews here. Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days will he revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Think about that. The Lord, 1,000 years is as 1 day with the Lord. And so here it says that he would smite them, they would be scattered, which they were. And in the 2nd day, after 2 days, he would, how does it say it? He will revive us. 2 days, almost 2,000 years. Within that 2nd day, that's what happened. 1948 was in the latter part of that 2nd day, that 2nd 1,000 years, and he did just exactly that. But then he says, and he will raise us up. And then in the 3rd day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. So in the third day, which we're in now, he will raise us up and we'll live in his sight. This third day will go on into millennial reign, which I know that's another big topic. And so in doing that, the day that we're in is that third day. I mean, we're in the last generation. That's all there are to it. We're in that third day. And that will go on into the millennial reign when Jesus will actually be here and we will reign with him like it says here. And in that third day, he will raise us up and we will live in his sight. You know, I mean, there again, I mean, that just makes sense to me. That just makes sense. He's saying, I'll scatter you. Second day, I'll bring you back. Third day, I'll let all this happen, and then eventually you'll live with me. And nobody else may say it that way. I just thought it was wild.
It's amazing to see that, because I'm watching Fun and Food channel, Nostradamus, you know, because everybody's really worried about what he's saying, you know, although it all lined up with what the Bible says.
Right.
Anyways, I was watching the prediction he made. 2148 or something like that was one of the big predictions that he made. I think it was the solar something,
In 28, did you say?
2148,
Oh, 2148.
3000. That would be the third day.
Right.
But it was the star, like a mountain, fell into the sea, and a third of it water and a third of it.
Right.
But when you said third year, the 48, that's, you know,
It's,
that lines up with what you're saying, but that's not, you know.
but it's wild. It's wild, though, that even people, I don't know, I mean, that everybody knows. Everybody knows. They don't know how. Some even thinks it's UFOs, whatever, you know. But they know something's going to happen. They know there's some kind of something that's just going to happen that just ends it. Doesn't end the world. The world never ends. The age ends. The age that we're living in, you know, because we go into the millennial reign and then we have heaven and earth. So it doesn't that the world is destroyed. It's just that we enter different ages through time. And this is another odd thing. I had heard this the other day and I thought that is wild. Abraham was born from the creation of Adam. Abraham was born after 1948 years. Abraham, which was the father, the start of Israel. You know, it's the start of the country. 1948. The second time Israel was born, 1948. Ain't that wild? I mean, there's nothing coincidence with the Lord. And there's so much to stuff that we would never dig it out. But there is not one word in this Bible that doesn't mean something. And that doesn't, it's just amazing. It is absolutely amazing, all the things that we could dig out and still not know. But when they went back to Israel, like I said, and all it was dry land. And time again, though, he said, and here's another one, he said, you know, even though it's desert now, there would be all this vegetation, because there had never been farming or anything there. And not long after they had got there, or not too long ago, a satellite picture identified this large underwater water, you know, underground that they didn't know was there. And somehow they tapped into that and started using all these special pumps and all this stuff. And that's when everything started blossoming. That's when everything started, they could grow fruit and vegetables and stuff. It was there the whole time, and the Lord knew that, but they didn't know that. I mean, just since they went back, and he recorded this. It blows my mind. The more and more, what little bit I can dig out of it, it blows my mind. And so, yeah, right. And so, so today there's hundreds of farmland and all that stuff that stretches up and down through there. They said that even if you had went 20 years ago or more, that it's a completely different place. It is completely different in that all of that's going on now, just like he said it would once they got there. And they said that they actually produce a lot more, some vegetables and fruits like tomatoes and all that stuff than the United States even does. They say that it's weird that even their cows produce more milk than what like America does. It just I'm I mean, I'm telling you, it's amazing to me. It's just absolutely amazing to me.
Most of your millionaires, big scientists, people that come up with all these great technologies, if you track their background, they're good.
Yeah, and that's true. That is true.
I like the milk and honey, though. I was just reading that yesterday. It's like global milk and honey. It don't just say you show up and it's pouring out. It's going to be there.
It's going to be there. Yeah,
But
yeah,
it'll be there.
yeah. It is amazing.
It's going to be everywhere. You don't have to work with it.
That's exactly right. And there again, another place, and the one I read first where he talked about the vegetation and, coming from Carmel and all of that, and I thought this was wild too. He called it the glory of Carmel in the vegetation part. One of the leading packing companies in Israel that ships from throughout the world is called the Carmel Packing Company. And the Lord used that very name. And it's just too much. It's just too much. It'll blow your mind. I'm leaving out a whole lot, but it just blows your mind. Let's see here. And two, they also are so intelligent, with technology and all of that thing. I think, didn't the cell phone actually originate from Israel? I think they were the first ones that came. And just all kinds, they said they had more patents than probably any other country. I mean, and there again, we're talking about this little space of land that the Lord has just gave them. It's just amazing. It's just amazing.
They wonder why we don't have enough cure for cancer, and a lot of that we ain't as far along as we are. But when you look at Hitler killed 6 million Jews.
Right.
Sometimes what blessings he take off the earth.
And that's true. That is true. Plus the other Jews that's been killed through the years. There's been different times that the Jews have went through a lot of, slaughter. It's just people have always hated them, and the Lord said He would. When I scatter you, you're not going to find any rest until I bring you back. And even now, though, even in their homeland, they don't have any rest. They're continuously fighting off. And there again, countries that's far, bigger than they are, but the Lord, it's just miraculous how He keeps them, and He said He would. Excuse me. And also, they said they would. The Bible talks about in Isaiah that they would be highways, and here He's talking about during the tribulation time. But He says, "In that day shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrians that shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptian into Assyria, and the Egyptians on and on. In that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land." And then there was one that it actually mentions a highway. But the strange thing about that is exactly where that says these highways will be, that these armies will come through during the tribulation. Israel is now building, going through the mountains and everything and building those roads. I mean, it just absolutely blows your mind. We are in a time when all of prophecy just day after day after day after day is being fulfilled. Once it started with Israel, and that's when it started, it is just constantly. It's just like it's amazing. And a lot of stuff that we don't even know that he's doing that's taking place. Because we're kind of isolated in this country because all we see is what involves us. We know sometimes we're not really interested in what's going on in the world or the prophecy that's going on. But prophecy, like I said, is stemming out of Israel. You've got to look to the Middle East, and you've got to look to these other places if you want to know if prophecy is being fulfilled. And it is. Because the Lord has blessed us to the point where we're just kind of out of the loop with the stuff that's going on right now. Maybe for at least a while. I don't know how long that'll last, but there again, you've got to know what's going on. And it is amazing the things that are going on. Amazing. Even with the armies, like with Russia and China and all that, it's all biblical. It's all biblical. And it's just amazing when you look into it and think, oh my gosh, he tells us this is going to happen. He even gives you the countries. It's amazing. Let's see here. Okay. Like I said, it all had to start with Israel, though. So in prophecy, Israel had to be established. Jerusalem had to become the capital of the nation. And isn't it odd that the United States has had so much to do with that? I know that's the reason the Lord brought this country up, was to bless Israel and to be missionaries and stuff. I tell people all the time, it's not because the Lord loves us more than he does these other countries. All these people that's being martyred every day. We've got a job to do. And if we don't do it, we're going to be held accountable for that. It's not because he loves us more that he blessed us more by living here. I mean, he blessed us by living here. But there was a reason for it. There is a reason for it. But not only did, like I said, Truman, sign the thing for Israel to be a country again, President Truman. And then, here lately, where we moved our embassy to Jerusalem and declared it being the capital of Israel. I mean, my goodness gracious. The very thing he said would happen. And then, of course, that he said that he would return his people from the four corners of the earth. And they were scattered, the all corners of the earth, and he did bring them back. And that the desert regions of Israel would be restored to a fertile and productive land, and it is. And that they would be, they would, army-wise and all of that they would be, probably even more so than a lot of other nations. Just miraculous, the technology and stuff that he has gave them. But Israel is becoming not only fertile in food, but they're finding so much things. They're finding this and that and the other that's making them rich, just like he said they would. From a desert where there was nothing, just in this matter of a few years, and to what it is now. It's a miracle. It is absolutely a miracle. Not only from him bringing them back, but everything that's happened since then. And it's all what he said. Even in the Old Testament, we're not talking about hundreds. We're talking about thousands of years that would happen again. And I was thinking the other day, since Israel's become a nation, everybody before that, we're talking about the thousands of years, hundreds of years, all before that. When people read the Bible, they would have to absolutely take it by faith. You know what I'm saying? Because they had to be sitting there thinking, there's not even a country, Israel, anymore. There's not even, none of this stuff is possible until then. And then once that happened, it's like the floodgates of prophecy just, started. Even to so many things that just up until a few years ago would have been impossible. Like, it talks about the two witnesses, during the tribulation, when they're killed and they're laying in the streets, and it says that everybody, every eye, the whole world would see them laying there. Up 50 years ago or less, people would have to think, how? They would have to take all this stuff by pure faith. And here we're seeing it, and since there's satellite and stuff, we're seeing it, and still yet people don't believe. Or still, it's just, when you stand back and look at the Bible and prophecy, and don't look at our age group, this generation, because this generation is the one that's seeing it all. And if you don't know what happened up until just a few years, which was nothing, according to prophecy, you'll miss it. You'll miss that we're living in the last generation. We're living in an exciting time. It can be terrifying when you read all the tribulation stuff, but it shouldn't be. Because Jesus said, when you see these things, he didn't say worry about it, pray about it. He said, lift up your head and rejoice. That just lets you know your redemption's getting very close. But I mean, until you really see all of this and how it really was and how these prophecies are miraculous, they're real down to the very letter. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it will blow your mind. The more you learn of the Bible, the more your faith grows. That's just all there are to it. It can't help but. It's amazing. And then, like we were talking, not only did Israel have to be and Jerusalem be, which there again in this generation, but there has to be a temple. And the best I can tell, I don't know. I think the temple will be probably started building once there's going to be a peace treaty. And there again, that's another thing. There has to be a treaty, like a peace treaty and other treaties over in Israel and for the Palestinians, because that's what the Antichrist, at the second half of the tribulation, after 3.5 years, that next part is when he goes into the temple and he doesn't do away with it, but it says it strengthens it. He confirms it, which means he strengthens it and adds to it. So there has to be a treaty already there that allows the Jews to, do sacrifices and all of that again. And so there has to be a treaty. That treaty is what starts the Antichrist's reign. That lasts 3.5 years. It's when he goes into the temple, he does away with this treaty. Let me see if I can find that real quick in Daniel where it talks about what he would. Yep. Amazing, and they don't even know what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? They don't even realize. The Lord. There's one place where he talks about a nation where he says, "I will put a hook in your jaw." You're going to be doing things that you don't even realize why you're doing it, and steer you in that direction. The will of God is going to be done. A lot of times we pray, Lord, I don't want to see this happen. I don't want to do this. What we need to be praying is your will be done. There's some things we're not going to stop. There's some things that's just, it's going to be, and we're just going to have to deal with it. But he.
United Nations right now, I was just reading it, I saw some of the news the other day. In 2013, they had passed 45 resolutions against Israel. And then, another 9 years later, they just passed another one last week against Israel over Palestine.
Yeah.
Out of all those years, how many they passed against China? One.
Right.
So the UN come against Israel, that's what the Jews will do at the moment.
Exactly. Let's see if I can. Let's see. I'd like to read that to you so you'll know. And of course, Revelation talks about the treaty a little bit too, but Daniel really. Let's see here. Oh, here it is. Okay, and in Daniel really has a lot more prophecy almost than Revelation does, or pretty much. But he says, and he's talking about. Okay, and arms shall stand on his part. And he's talking about the Antichrist coming down through here. And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. That's the temple, because it says that the Antichrist would also go in and, the abomination of desolation, and sets himself up as God in the temple. And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifices. So see there again, the Jews have got permission to do sacrificing again in the temple in Israel. And that's one thing he does is stop that at the second 3.5 years. And they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. So And then there's another place where it actually says 3.5 years. That's when he does that. But I love the next verse in this in Daniel. I don't have anything to do that, but it does us. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. In other words, he's going to be a charismatic person that by flattery he gets all these countries to do what he wants and all of that. But, it says but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. I love that verse after that. And I'm thinking, yes, yes, even though everything's breaking loose and it looks bad, the people that really do know their God will be strong and do exploits. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, why are we not doing them? That could happen right now. We're in the end days, and, we need to be, I just think we need to be doing a lot more somehow than what we're doing. If he tells us that we will do exploits, you know what that means? That means like dynamite stuff. That means like miraculous stuff. And he says we'll be doing that we need to be doing that. We need to quit looking at tribulation as being the last day. We are in the last days. That's leading up to that, and that could happen any day. That's the thing about all these prophecies that he gave. Now that all of that's happened since Israel, all that, there is not one single thing that I can think of that would need to be done before the tribulation could start. Does that make sense? And all this other be fulfilled during that time. And the rapture, which that's another big topic. But, and if that's the case, if everything's already done to the point where the tribulation could start and be fulfilled with everything we've already got in this world, then how much closer is the rapture if you believe in, pre-trib? So, man, we're just right there. And yet, I'm afraid we grasp that, but then we'll forget it the next day or something. I don't know what it is. It's like we don't hang on to that. But, we better, though, because he said he's coming after people that are looking for him, that's waiting, that's not wrapped up in other stuff to the point where you're not even thinking he can come that day. Yep. Right.
None of that is bad. It's just normal life. They was living like anything.
Right. Right. They were living their life, and there again, like you said, that's our daily life. But they had warning that life was about to end, but yet they continued on, like you said, like it was never going to end. We need to just be so mindful and so careful. I don't know. But going back to that treaty, of course, is, and you probably all know about that, where they're trying to get other countries to come on board with Israel and do all that. And so far, I think they've got 3 or 4 maybe or something. That is just like a precursor to the treaty that's going to be. That's just all they are to it. Because you all may remember the treaty that President Trump had done and tried to get them to sign it. And it pretty much included the things that the Bible says would be in this treaty. One of the things is the Palestinians must have a state, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, okay, you got to let Israel have theirs, and we'll make you one. And it also has, and I'm saying this because this is what's in Revelation and all these other prophecies that's going to happen during there, so they have to be in certain parts of that area. It says that for this treaty, what they want to do is establish a Palestinian state in Judea. Judea is like what's called the West Bank, and I'm probably going over a bunch of stuff you just don't really care about, but I just think it's fascinating. And in this West Bank, the thing that intrigued me about that treaty was that one of the things has to be that the Jews that's living there now would have to be allowed to stay there. You know, even though they might give that part and make that part of the Palestinian state, the Israelites that's there now would have to be able to stay there. And it just lets me know what it means then, if that's in the treaty. In Matthew 24, when the Lord says, and he's talking to the Jews at this part in 24, he said, and let those that are in Judea, when all this starts coming about, let them flee to the mountains. If the Jews, if they make that part of Palestine and the Palestinians don't let them stay there, they wouldn't be there. But even in Matthew, he says, those that are in Judea flee to the mountains. Because apparently the beast, the Antichrist, is going to say, that's not happening anymore, and start doing whatever he's going to do. So flee to the mountains. Does that make sense? I just thought that made so much sense to me. And then fleeing to the mountains, this is another thing that people think. And I don't know whether they get that from something actually area-wise in the Bible, but when it talks about mountains, there's a mountainous city that they found not too long ago that had been desolate for hundreds of years. Petra, has anybody heard about that? To where you can't get in by car or anything like that, but you can get in by foot. A whole city that would take care of them, take care of the Jews, you know, during all this tribulation and everything. That's right up, I think it's in Jordan. And so it's amazing what's just already there and what the Lord is doing and what he's already told us all this time ago that's happening right now, right today. It just, I don't know, it just thrills me. Uh-huh.
The Jews, the Christian Jews, Muslims, and I guess the Palestinians.
Yeah.
Palestinians, you know, it's like a powder keg right now.
Yeah. And that's part of what they want done in this treaty that's going to be, too, is that every one of them will be able to worship there. But they'll let the Jews worship there also, and that's where the Jews come in being able to sacrifice again. Another thing that the Antichrist stops. And so, see, all of that is already what they're trying to do today. It just amazes me. And then, too, and I think, because there is a place in Revelation where the Lord tells John to measure, like the temple, and it's strange because it says, and leave a place for the Gentile. It's almost like there is going to be a place for the Palestinians, the Muslims, to worship. Leave that part for them. And so if that's part of the treaty, that's exactly what the Bible says. I mean, it's just amazing. You know, and I'm sure they think they came up with all of this themselves, you know, the governments and stuff. But it's exactly, they have got in there what they want, exactly what the Bible says is going to happen. It is amazing. So it's just, I don't know, there's just all kinds of stuff. Let's see, I got a few minutes. Like I said, there has to be a temple. And the amazing thing is that not only the Lord, when he does something, it's precise. It's not, well, maybe this is happening, this is going to happen. It's precise, and he tells us. In the temple is such a holy place. Always was such a, it's where the Lord was. It's where God was at the time. That when that temple comes back into being, it has to be according to what the Jews were told to do, how to build it, the furniture in it, what the priest wears, everything has to be exact. And I thought, well, you know, there's a lot of that stuff lost. Well, come to find out, and I might remember when Isaiah mentioned one night, we was talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. When in 1967, I think, when they found those, the Dead Sea Scrolls back in the caves that had been there since they destroyed Israel in 70 AD. All this time hid. And most of it was biblical, you know, the whole book of Isaiah they found in it. That was strange to me because Isaiah is so full of prophecy, you know, of the end time. 46. And that's right. And then they, they found all of that. They found fragments of every book in the Old Testament, except for Ruth. I think for some reason they say it's there somewhere, But fragments, at least, of every book in the Old Testament and the complete book, and they all match. That's another way they cannot say that the Bible it's changed. No, exact same thing, wrote on scrolls and all that. But in that, they also found some what they call copper scrolls, and those were made out of I guess like aluminum or what not aluminum, but just something different that would last longer, because in those they have found all kinds of things where the priest had to, when they were destroying Jerusalem, they took it out of the temple and took and hid it. I mean, amazing. And this is just a few things. Let's see. The red heifer, you probably always heard about that. There's got to be a red heifer for the ashes, because they used the ashes of the red heifer, and it had to be without spot blemish. It had to be complete. They used the ashes of that, the priest did, as a cleansing. If they'd been around dead bodies, if they'd been around whatever, it was kind of like a cleansing that they had to do, and it had to be from that red heifer. They have actually found the last ashes of that last heifer in a vessel that a priest had got out of the temple before they destroyed it and hid it. Can you and then too, and so there needs to be another too, and so they think now that they have found one, another one it's one of our states, Montana or something. They're watching it because it has to be at least 3 years without anything blemish come on it, and I think it's getting close to that time. But I mean, just amazing. And so they've got that. And another thing too is that there has to be a Sanhedrin Court. That was the highest court in Israel. They determined everything about the temple and everything. And so, guess what? They have a Sanhedrin Court now. They have went back and got all the people that qualifies, because the Lord gave specific, to be a priest, and to be on that Sanhedrin Court, you had to be out of the tribe of blah, 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 do all this. They have found that, and they have started a Sanhedrin Court again. And they are over building the temple. Their main goal is to build the temple and to get all these artifacts and stuff. And they have enough money raised already, they said, to, if they okay it, they could start it tomorrow and finish it.
And you have to understand why that is so amazing is when the Jews were scattered, they lost all of their lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And to come back into a nation and then be able to literally begin to trace back an individual's lineage,
Right.
all the way back thousands of years, like that is absolutely
DNA and stuff. See, all that stuff has to come into play. That just happened this last few years. Nothing is coincidence. Every bit of it it's amazing.
I mean, for hundreds and hundreds of years,
right.
they had no record
Right.
of who they,
No.
it was just all oral.
Right.
Your grandfather was this, your
Right.
grandfather was this. They couldn't record it anywhere.
No. No, and they were scattered. It wasn't like they were all in a group together, thinking, amazing.
And I seen the Sanhedrin group on what's it, this old American War thing, and it's just like the group sitting around the UN. It ain't like Old Testament.
Right.
It's modern day.
It's modern day.
Sitting around with phones and microphones
Yeah.
and cameras.
It,
It's like the UN having a meeting.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. And like I said, and they've got enough money raised to build the temple. They know how to build it because the Lord gave instructions. And the anointing oil that they had to anoint all the pieces of furniture in there, they actually found the last bit of that another priest had hid in one of those caves, and they had these pharmaceuticals and stuff to test it, because the Bible tells us what's in it. There's 5 ingredients. And one of them was so rare that it was hard to find, that it was like there was only 2 groves of where they could get it. But that's it. They have found it, and for a surety, that's what that priest had put in there, so that they can have the exact same thing that was in the temple. The priest's robes, they know how to do that, and that's another thing. There was a special dye that they used from a snail that for the one part of the robe, and the Bible even talks about it, it turns a dark blue or something, I can't remember. But when they threaded that, it turned blue. Anyway, the snail or whatever it was that they had was extinct up until, guess what? Just a few years ago. They found it, and they can even do that now. I'm telling you, it will blow your mind. I'm just like, there's no denying. There is absolutely no denying that the Lord has got everything ready. And like I said, and it's all been a hurry, and it will be. I mean, because we're there, and anything can happen now. Anything can happen. Let's see here. I was trying to think of some of the other things. Oh, there's just so much. There's so much that there's another place where it talks about during the tribulation where the people would go through. Well, I can read that real quick. I think I got it. In Revelation, let's see, 16:12. It says, "And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared." And so here's where it's talking about this, this army from the east, going through, and it says that the great river Euphrates would be dried up and they would march through. 200 million. Guess who boasts about having a 200 million army? China. And it says Asian. So, I mean, they built a dam. It took like 22 dams. It's so big. And Turkey did that. And that's not been that many years ago. And they said it was wild because when they opened, their grand opening, that he pushed a button. And when he did that, all the water just went down. I mean, first time that was ever even possible for that scripture to be fulfilled, going over on dry land, that they have done that now. Just thing after thing after thing, that the tribulation, like I said, could start tomorrow and there wouldn't be nothing stopping it, as far as what is going to be done and needs to be done. We have seen the fulfillment of, oh my goodness, just wild stuff. Yeah. Euphrates River seems to be a place, actually, even for demonic angels. When you get on into Revelation, so there's just so much. But like I said, it's good to go into all of that, in Revelation and all of that. But without knowing the history of Israel is God's time clock. I'm serious. When that happened, that's when it started. That's when the end days, the real end days, that started. And he says this generation will not pass away until you see all this done. We are living in that, and yet I don't know what's wrong with us. We just push that aside and think about everything else, and instead of winning souls. But anyway, okay.